Hey friends, welcome back to the Daily Dose. We're rolling up on day number 75. Thank you guys for staying with us this whole time. What we're going to be looking at today is Psalm number 75, as well as Judges chapter 16 through 18. So let's go ahead and just jump right on into our summary. Don't forget to go down below in the description of this video. There's a link you can click on. That'll pop up a PDF file that has got the schedule of the Bible reading plan that we're using as we walk through the Bible together as a community over the course of a year. But without further ado, we'll look at what we got going on right now. So, the summary for today is we're talking about Samson again. And we left off kind of catching up on some of the early parts of Samson's story the other day. So, where we are today, Samson falls for Delilah, a woman named Delilah. I'm sure you've heard about Samson and Delilah before. And, so far we have found out that Samson is an extremely strong guy, right? Very strong, physically strong, very burly, strong dude, like superhuman strength. And Samson's enemies and the Philistines, people are trying to figure out what it is that this guy has that makes him tick. They're trying to figure out what his weaknesses are, right? So, basically, some people come up to Delilah and they're like, hey, you need to figure out what this guy's secret is, trick him into telling you what his weakness is, and then you need to tell us what that is, right? So she makes a few attempts, and these attempts don't necessarily go anywhere, but eventually she hounds Samson enough that he ends up giving up the secret, and he says, hey, if you cut my hair, that's going to take away my power, basically. And sure enough, things do not go well from that point on. Delilah goes and tells the people that she is in cahoots with, and they basically come and they get Samson, they subdue him, and he gets taken captive once they learn how they can take away his power. So we read that Samson's eyes are gouged out. His eyes are gouged out so that he cannot see. They blind him. And he gets put in prison, basically. So we come to a point in the story where there's kind of a party going down in this temple, and they want to bring Samson out of the prison and bring him into the temple and, have him for entertainment of some kind or another, probably to poke fun at him or, whatever. So they bring Samson into the temple, and they position him in, I guess, the middle of the temple, and he's able to reach out and feel these two pillars, and he can tell by feeling these pillars that they are the load-bearing pillars for this temple. And so he's able to basically muster up enough strength to push these two pillars apart far enough that they break. The whole temple comes down. A lot of people die. A lot of the bad guys go down. And we read that that Samson killed many more when he died in the process of taking the temple down, because he dies as well. But he killed many more people at that time when he brought the temple down than the entire time that he was alive. So there must have been a lot of people in this temple. It must have been really big, and there must have been a lot of lives lost that day. So from there we move on to a story about Micah's idols. So this guy Micah that we read about, we don't know a whole lot about him. He just kind of pops up in the story. But what we do find out is that this guy Micah hires a Levite to be his personal priest. So I guess there's this Levite who kind of went rogue. He's AWOL from his tribe, and he's wandering around kind of looking for some unique employment opportunities. And I don't believe the Levites were supposed to be doing that. They were supposed to be working in the temple. But anyways, this Levite comes along and says, hey, I'll be your personal priest if you hire me. So Micah ends up hiring this personal priest. We also read that Micah ends up making some idols. And from there, we move on into another story, similar story, but we're kind of coming at it from a different angle. So we read about the Danites, the tribe of Dan, and they are going to settle in this town, Laish. So these Danites were seeking a place to live. And as they're coming around seeking a place to live and where they can settle down at, they come across this guy, Micah, right? So now these two stories kind of come together. We find out that that they take this guy's idols and they take his priest and they threaten to harm him if he protests, right? They end up attacking this town, Laish. They burn it to the ground, they rebuild it, and then they name it Dan, right, after their tribe, the Danites. That is the gist of it as far as our summary goes for today. But I encourage you guys to dig in because I did not cover anything, or excuse me, I didn't cover everything by any stretch of the imagination. I'm quite tongue-tied today. Thanks for bearing with me. As far as my point of interest that I wanted to touch on just briefly, this is coming at you from the psalm that we're reading today, and this comes from verses 2 and 3. It says, "You say, I choose the appointed time. It is I who judge with equity. When the earth and all its people quake, it is I who hold its pillars." And those words are essentially coming from God. Those are the words that God is saying through David. And I think that it's interesting and probably coincidental, but we read about Samson, taking these two pillars in the temple and kind of demolishing them and bringing the whole thing down. And then in our psalm today, we read that it is God who, in regards to the earth, holds its pillars. He holds them. He keeps them up. Kind of like the old story about that guy Atlas that held up the world on his shoulders. That's kind of what I picture here is, God holding up the pillars of the world, keeping it going. And that just speaks of God's sovereignty and his ownership over creation and his power to hold it all together. And I also notice where it says that God says, "I choose the appointed time. It is I who judge with equity." It's good to know that we have a judge who is equal, who judges with equity, right? He's a fair judge and he judges equally. That's the good news. The bad news is that he's a fair judge and he gives out just judgment, right? Because I'm a sinner, just like you and everybody else, and I deserve God's wrath. I don't deserve God's mercy because of my sin, right? So because God judges with equity and his judgments are fair and they're just, if he's judging me justly, I don't get heaven. I get the opposite. But praise be to God that he sent Jesus to pay the price for our debts, for our sins, right? Jesus paid the price so that we don't have to. That's the beauty. That's the good news. And friends, if you have not put your trust and faith in Jesus, I plead with you to consider doing that. Trust the work that Jesus did on the cross so that our relationship, your relationship, my relationship, so that we can be restored to our Father in heaven and we can be ushered into the kingdom of believers. I'll just leave you guys with that for today. I thank you so much for being here. I enjoy doing this, so thanks for being here with me, and I will see you guys again tomorrow. So, what do we normally say at the end? That's right. We normally say, until we meet again. Deuces.